Welcome to Financial Inclusion Week. I am Mayada El-Zoghbi, and I'm the Managing Director of the Center for Financial Inclusion. We're so excited to have so many of you join this year's event. We have over 2,100 people registered, and we know that many more will be joining throughout the week. I have to say that I've been so inspired by this year's response to the event. We opened the process for session submissions a couple of months ago, and we're so amazed to receive over 140 session submissions. We've had the difficult task of selecting which of these sessions get the global plenary slots, which are run in parallel, and which are slotted for the on-demand section of the agenda. It's been an incredibly challenging process, but we've had help from an external committee, so thanks to them. What you will see this week is the result of that hard work. The final agenda is truly a rich one. Some of you may have already experienced the agenda. As of this morning, we already kicked off with several parallel sessions. We have a total of 86 sessions during the week and 279 speakers, significantly more than we had last year. We've really tried our best to minimize the number of parallel sessions to allow people the chance to listen to as many live sessions as possible. But inevitably, there will be sessions happening at different time zones or in parallel, and you'll have to miss a few. That's why we will keep the platform open, so even if you miss a session, you can always listen to it later. And we'll make all the recordings available on our YouTube channel after the event, so you can continue to refer back to them throughout the year, something we know people really appreciated last year. I think last year after the week, we had around 40,000 people view sessions through the YouTube channel. So this might be a really good time to get your initial input. What do you hope to get out of this year's Financial Inclusion Week? My colleague will show you a poll. We'd like to hear from you. Are you here to learn something new? Are you here to improve your knowledge on inclusive finance? Are you here to share information about your program or organization? Or perhaps you're here to meet some other actors working on similar issues, find partners for your work, or something else. If you have something else you want to contribute, please write in the chat. This year we have an artist working with us, Sonja Niederhumer, coming from Graphic Harvest in South Africa. She'll be drawing some of the sessions that some of the things that she'll hear in the chat. So I'll give you guys a few moments to respond. In the meantime, I just wanted to go over a little bit of the calendar with you. So each day begins with a set of parallel sessions where you'll be able to choose between 2 or 3 sessions. The core of the agenda each day is the global plenary, where there's only one session running live at a time. As I mentioned already, these were competitively selected, and we really tried to focus on what had the most global appeal to as many people as possible. We were also trying to capture what were new topics that have not been screened elsewhere. So in addition to the global plenary, we also have regional plenaries, where the content and the time is targeting different audiences around the world. This year, we are featuring content for Asia, for Sub-Saharan Africa, and for Latin America. And finally, we also have an on-demand section. These are pre-recorded sessions that can be accessed at any time at your convenience. So I hope my colleagues will post the results of the poll so I can reflect a little bit about what I'm hearing from the audience. If not, I can keep going. All right, why don't I just keep going? This year's theme is promoting prosperity in an era of uncertainty. When we began planning the event about 6 months ago, it was really difficult to imagine where we would be with the pandemic. It became clear that uncertainty would stay with us for some time. Countries are very different places. In some countries, the pandemic is not over, and there are additional waves of infections. While in others, like the United States, the situation is improving thanks to abundant vaccines and even booster shots. We know there are still lockdowns happening in some countries, and these will continue to have repercussions on the economy. These measures inevitably affect low-income people and micro and small enterprises much more so than they do white-collar workers. CFI's own longitudinal research on micro and small enterprises, we've been collecting data every 2 months for a year. So we've been collecting 6 waves of data across 4 countries. Those were Colombia, Nigeria, India, and Indonesia. That data is showing us that over time, there has been some rebounding of businesses. We've seen a return of some of the revenue that was initially lost. We've also seen rebounding of some of the labor force. But in no country has business rebounded to its pre-pandemic levels. In most countries, labor has only rebounded to about 50% of pre-pandemic levels. As most of us know, micro and small enterprises are the majority employers in a lot of developing countries, and this makes this a very troubling indicator. What is very stark is how vulnerable people are to any new shocks. We collected data on people's prior experience with climate shocks, and it's not surprising that those who experienced a prior climate shock like flooding, droughts, or fires found it harder to recover from the pandemic. With some exceptions, businesses that experienced the climate shock were less likely to cover business expenses, less likely to see a rebounding in profits, and less likely to cover household expenses. Fortunately, most governments have distributed cash transfers to the vulnerable, and perhaps this has prevented widespread hunger. But many of these programs did not target micro and small enterprises. And indeed, our surveys found that very few businesses actually benefited from these programs. So there's still a lot to do to help businesses recover. Collectively, we need to do better. Governments only have so much tax revenue and can only spend and borrow so much. So it's really up to the private sector and the development community to ensure that our investments and support to developing countries continues to focus on supporting resilience and prosperity, despite this fragile economic situation we find ourselves in. All right, so we're getting ready for the next poll, and I know I didn't share the results of the first poll. So from the first poll, we had 31% indicated that they're here to improve their knowledge of inclusive finance. And the second most cited reason was to meet other actors working on similar issues. So we're really happy that you're here to do these things. Let's move on to the second poll. So the second poll is really a reflection on our time. What's the biggest concern you have on your mind today? Does it continue to be the pandemic? Are you concerned about some of these livelihood issues that I've just mentioned on how the pandemic is affecting livelihoods of low-income people and micro and small enterprises? Or perhaps it's climate change. As we know, COP26 is happening this week. It's a hot topic on the global agenda. Perhaps it's racial equity, inequality, or something else. Once again, please write in the chat if you have a different concern that you wanted to flag, and Sonja will draw to those messages. So as you're thinking this through, let me continue on. I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of inclusive finance. CFI believes that inclusive finance has an important role to play in addressing some of society's biggest concerns. But I have to say, sometimes it's not so immediate and not so obvious to most people. So you have to work a little harder to demonstrate how inclusive finance can address these broader questions that we are experiencing in the world today. Let's just take the topic of climate change. I already mentioned that COP26 is taking place in Glasgow, and we know it's an incredibly important topic that's going to affect every single one of us. So this week we have many sessions to discuss this topic, and I myself am moderating one on Wednesday, so a little plug for my session. We know that low-income people and MSMEs are vulnerable to climate shocks. I mentioned already what our data is showing in terms of people's vulnerabilities and their ability to recover. But what can financial services actually do to address this vulnerability? So for one, financial services providers could offer specific products that help offset the effects of weather shocks. There's one example I particularly like, and it's an MFI in India that's offering loans to customers to purchase heat-reflective white paint. Seems like a pretty simple innovation, but this white paint, when used on rooftops, helps offset and shield people and animals from the oppressive heat. There's also lots of other more complex ideas. For example, insurance. Insurance can be used as a very important tool to be used to reduce risk that farmers face. Most of us are very familiar with weather index insurance, but there are new approaches that are being tested and that could potentially have higher take-up by farmers. I just heard of an interesting innovation on picture-based insurance. This is a product where farmers or lead farmers take photos of crops, and over time, this data is used to assess yields and payouts. It's a model that could potentially increase farmer take-up. At least that's what happened in India when it was rolled out. It's being tested in other markets now. We need many, many more innovations like these, and we need much more widespread diffusion of these innovations when they're proven to work to help low-income people. On the issue of racial equity, we've been doing some work on artificial intelligence and machine learning and its application in credit underwriting. There is significant evidence that shows that the data that is used to train these algorithms can yield subpar results if this data itself depicts historical, geographic, or gender differences. So how fintechs, platforms, and other financial service providers that are using AI and machine learning and the checks that they're using when they're deploying these innovations, that can go a long way to determine whether we're extending or eliminating racial inequity. We're living in a really fragile moment in time. There's a lot of structural change happening within a fragile economic recovery. At CFI, we believe that inclusive finance must evolve to continue to serve the needs of low-income people and small businesses. Financial services are the fuel that drives the economy, and we need to make sure that this fuel continues to flow, that it doesn't create harm, and that it is not extractive, and it allows people to prosper. So, in terms of the last poll, it seems like the biggest concern on people's minds is livelihoods of low-income people and micro and small enterprises, as well as climate change, followed by inequality. Now to my third question to the audience. How confident are you that inclusive finance can address these concerns that we've raised? Are you very confident, somewhat confident, neutral, not confident, or concerned? Once again, please do write in the chat. Financial Inclusion Week is a very unique platform. It started as a very simple calendar that we organized, and it was a very low lift for CFI. Our role was really just hosting the calendar and doing some marketing. Over time, we realized what an important community event it was. There are a lot of reasons for this. It's open to the public, it's for free, it promotes a community-driven agenda, it gives people a chance to check in with each other, and it allows a platform to discuss and debate emerging topics in a rapidly changing context. By the end of the week, you'll find that collectively, we've created a wealth of content and that we'll have a robust reference library that we know people refer to throughout the year. At CFI, we value the partnerships we have and know that we have so much to learn from one another. That's why we invest in this event. We wouldn't be able to do that, however, without our core funders. So I just wanted to say a few words of thanks to our core funders, Credit Suisse, Visa Foundation, and our hosting organization, Axion International. This year, we also have session sponsors, and I wanted to mention them as well. We have Aspen Institute, IDB Lab, Opportunity International, and the sponsors of the IF50 competition, Visa, MetLife Foundation, Comic Relief, and Jersey Overseas Aid. All right, in terms of the last poll, 50% are somewhat confident that inclusive finance can help us address some of these global challenges. And 21% are not confident at all. That's very interesting, actually. We have a lot to show, I guess, this week, and hopefully we can change your minds. Now, before I close this opening session, and we dive into the full agenda, I'd like to invite Monda Raquel Webb to read a poem that she has written for us for Financial Inclusion Week. The poem is called Prosperous Possibilities, A New Dawn. I met Monda last week and was so impressed with her, and I know that you will find her equally impressive. She's a performing artist, a journalist, a filmmaker, and an award-winning author. But just because she can, she also has a background in finance, which I was, pretty blown away by. She worked at Fannie Mae for 15 years and at a fintech startup for a year and a half. Because of this very unique perspective, both as an insider to the finance field, as well as an observer, as an artist and a journalist, you'll hear that Monda really understands our world of inclusive finance. But precisely because she's a talented writer, she infuses this understanding with artistry and an important perspective of racial history. I think Monda captures the spirit of Financial Inclusion Week well. I think she really captures the moment we live in. I hope you will enjoy this as much as I do. Hand it over to you, Monda.
Okay. Good morning and thank you. So what I'm going to share with you today is a poem called Prosperous Possibilities, A New Dawn. Promoting prosperity in an era of uncertainty. Is this possible? It can't be an era to cement gender parity, boost pride and dignity, guarantee equality, and empower women in their communities, ultimately fostering sustainability. Aldous Huxley envisioned a brave new world. So do I for all women and girls. Financial inclusion should not be an altered state. An opportunity to drastically improve lives shouldn't be up for debate. What would the big blue marble be like if we began with a clean slate? Before we get there, we must explore the trends, understand where we are and where we've been. In places where historically many women are marginalized, societal roles are unchallenged, cultural norms uncompromised. You see, there's been a zeitgeist towards global economy shifting. Slowly but surely, gender restrictions are lifting, giving rise to women so we can become our most valuable franchise. So in 2011, the World Bank and the Gates Foundation gave us a treasure, the Global Findex Database, a comprehensive way to measure the way world economies manage risk, save, and borrow, ushering in a new way to uplift the extremely poor. You see, the promise of a greater tomorrow. So enter the digital arena, a proven means to advance new ways of cash infusion. But somehow, with all the hype, there's been a gap concerning gender inclusion. Solutions notwithstanding, microfinance loans, cell phones made a slight dent, but women still lag behind men with accounts and such by about 9%. By 2019, let the record show the world was in a much better place. Communities continued to prosper and grow, the highest noted in history. So none of us were prepared or knew how to brace for months of being scared by a disease which at first was a total mystery and hard to trace, stood at ease and punched Mother Earth right in the face. Airborne, the virus was everywhere, armed, dangerous, with very little facts, floating along the faintest breeze like a dandelion in the air, stopping the world in her tracks, dropping us to our bare knees. You see, Corona blew in like a cyclone, tearing down families, ripping up homes. It broke my heart to see that 97 million fell back into poverty in 2020 alone. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. During the age of the coronavirus, where a very few thrived, most families fought like hell to stay alive, to exist on faith, resourcefulness, and mother wit. It gave many of us a time to think, how to level the playing fields with newly restructured banks, looking to mitigate the digital divide, rebuild communities with respect, dignity, and pride, especially when it comes to gender inclusion. The United Nations has drawn a conclusion that women should no longer succumb to financial contusions with SDG number 5 to achieve equality for all women and girls, doing traditional norms, disrupting traditional norms, and changing mindsets all over the world. For the greater good in every neighborhood, whether it's urban or rural, total financial inclusion, exponentially, one becomes plural. Nonprofits, NGOs, all coming together to empower our sisters, helping them generate incomes, protecting living standards with or without their misters, carving out new ways to create accounts, the ability to save in varying amounts, and then some, giving our sisters a leg to stand on and a well to pull from. Once women can access essential services, impervious to historical nervousness of knowing their places at risk of disrespecting their men, former heads bowed, only then will they be able to stand tall, empowered, proud. As old traditions crumble and fall, total financial inclusion will uplift us all. Eradicating poverty is a complex problem to solve. There's no way around it. Communities should embrace that to fully evolve without retribution, institutional thinking should respectfully be erased, and women can raise babies, run businesses, and keep food on family plates. It's more than possible. Didn't two billionaires just compete in a race this year to go to space? Which they did with great success, giving them bragging rights, a reason to poke out their chests. So the case for women's financial inclusion rests. Promoting prosperity in an era of uncertainty. Possible? Yes, most certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Monda. That was really, truly incredible. You're like the only person I know who could make inclusive finance so poetic. So congrats to you. Very inspirational. Monda's poem obviously features one of the topics that is a big priority in Financial Inclusion Week. It's a priority for CFI and many others. And we have 8 sessions dedicated to discussing women's financial inclusion. And the theme is cross-cutting across many other sessions as well. We've had one question in the chat that I just wanted to react to. Someone is asking about the impact of the pandemic, as well as rise in oil, gas, electric energy, and prices, and what this has meant for financial inclusion operations globally and their clients. And honestly, I can't say I have the answer. All I can say is that our data is trying to capture, we've been doing this, as I mentioned earlier, longitudinal research. So we're getting a sense of how it's impacting people over time. And I would say that surprisingly in Nigeria, which is a country that's very impacted by the price of oil, and it is an oil producer, we have seen ups and downs through every wave. And surprisingly, though, Nigerian recovery of the micro and small enterprise sector has been in some ways more robust than some of the other countries we've seen. So what I'm observing is the pandemic itself, the effect of the pandemic itself, for example, on Indonesia and in India, has been more severe than perhaps the rise of inflation in some of the other countries. However, of course, our data is not in every country. I know that there are very specific experiences across the world. I think the point of this week is to bring lessons and learning from across different actors. And hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have more to say about this topic. So thank you for your question. We have a lot of content this week. I invite you to explore the site. Remember that there's the live sessions, but there's also the on-demand sessions where you can access the content at any time, convenient to you. We'll have a lot of other features. We'll have the artist corner like we had during this session. We'll have storytelling and network functions. This year's platform is a much more robust networking platform. So we do hope you you take advantage of it and meet people that you may normally not interact with in a session. Financial Inclusion Week is an event that is based on this community of people who come together and want to learn together. Therefore, we need to continue to hear from you so that we can evolve the event and continue to improve it. You'll receive one question survey at the end of each session. Please do respond. Don't ignore it. And we'll be sharing an evaluation at the end of the week. Please enjoy the week. Attend as many sessions as you can, and best of luck.